What if the most attractive person in the room isn't the one with the best clothes or like the sharpest wit?
Right, or the loudest voice.
Yeah, exactly. What if it's the one who simply doesn't care if you notice them at all? Like if you ever sat quietly in a room and just felt completely invisible while you compare yourself to literally everyone else.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like you were physically taking up space on a chair, but, energetically, you've just completely faded into the wallpaper.
Yeah, it's a really specific kind of isolation. You aren't physically alone, but you've somehow managed to completely erase your own presence.
You really have. And today's deep dive is taking a close look at that exact feeling. We're pulling insights from this really fascinating audio piece titled The Magnetic Power of Self-Acceptance. And we're specifically focusing on a segment called Why Confidence Feels More Attractive. And to really understand this, we're going to follow a real-world case study about a man named Daniel.
Right, Daniel.
And Daniel adds a really compelling layer to this universal feeling of inadequacy because he isn't just trying to fit into a standard office. He's navigating a native English-speaking workplace while he is still actively learning the language.
Which is, incredibly daunting. Navigating complex office dynamics is hard enough, right?
Oh, for sure.
But trying to do it when you constantly feel like you lack the basic vocabulary to express your true personality, that just adds this massive layer of vulnerability.
It really does.
So our mission today is to decode the true definition of attractiveness through Daniel's journey. We want to prove that true magnetism actually has very little to do with physical appearance or having a perfect vocabulary.
Right.
And more importantly, we are going to extract a practical, step-by-step guide on how you can move from feeling completely invisible to finally feeling seen.
It's just such a relatable struggle. I think about this feeling of inadequacy as being kind of similar to scrolling through a highly curated social media feed, but you're doing it in real life.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Right. You look around the room at everyone else's seemingly perfect exterior. Like they have the perfect words, the perfect posture, the perfect cadence, and you just assume they have it all figured out.
Yeah, you assume they're flawless.
Exactly.
Huh.
And as a result of that assumption, you just mute your own voice. You cancel yourself out before anyone else even have the chance to interact with you.
And that internal muting is exactly where Daniel starts his journey. He is constantly looking at the people around him, and his internal monologue is just this relentless loop of comparison.
It's exhausting.
It is.
Yeah.
He looks at his native-speaking peers and he thinks, they sound so much smarter than me, or they look so much more relaxed than me.
And those thoughts, they aren't just floating in the ether. They have immediate physical consequences.
Absolutely. What's fascinating here is how Daniel's internal monologue actually creates his external reality.
Yes. Because of this internal monologue, he actively avoids conversations at work. When he's in social situations, he listens, but he rarely speaks.
He retreats inward.
He does. And the ultimate result of that retreat is that he feels like a ghost. He decides he is less than, he acts like he is less than, and so the world treats him as if he isn't there.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The lack of attractiveness isn't physical at all. It's this void of presence caused by his own self-censorship.
Wait, but if we feel disconnected, shouldn't evolution wire us to try harder to connect?
You would think so, yeah.
Like, why is our default reaction to feeling less than to literally shrink ourselves down and stop talking? You'd think our brains would tell us to speak up so we aren't left behind by the group.
Well, it all comes down to how the brain's threat detection system operates. We have to remember that our brains evolved in small hunter-gatherer tribes.
Right, where social rejection was dangerous.
Exactly. It literally meant death. If you were cast out of the group, you couldn't survive. So the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm system, it interprets social judgment as a literal physical threat.
Wow.
It doesn't know the difference between a judgmental coworker and a hungry predator.
So shrinking and staying quiet is essentially the evolutionary freeze response.
Yes, and it's a brilliant, if flawed, defense mechanism. By playing dead socially, the predator, in this case, judgment or embarrassment over his English passes right by.
Oh, I see.
If you don't speak, you can't mispronounce a word. If you don't take up space, you can't be pushed out of it.
Right. So Daniel is protecting his nervous system from the judgment he fears. But the tragic cost of that biological protection is total social isolation.
Exactly. He's successfully keeping himself safe from criticism, but in doing so, he's starving himself of human connection.
And he stays stuck in that survival mode until his perspective gets completely shattered. He starts watching someone at work who defies every single assumption he has about what makes a person popular or confident or attractive.
Enter his colleague, Alex.
Yes, Alex.
Alex is such a fascinating case study in magnetism. The source explicitly describes him as not being the most perfect-looking person.
Right, he doesn't look like a movie star.
No, and he isn't the loudest guy in the room either. He isn't delivering perfectly polished, charismatic monologues at the water cooler.
But despite all of that, people are just inexplicably drawn to him. Daniel watches Alex and is totally baffled. People genuinely like Alex. They linger at his desk.
They do. They really enjoy talking to him, and they seem deeply comfortable around him.
So Daniel, who has been obsessing over his own perceived physical and linguistic flaws, starts studying Alex like a scientist to figure out the secret.
And what he notices is stunningly simple. Alex speaks calmly. He smiles easily. He listens carefully. There is absolutely no grand performance happening.
Those traits sound simple, but they represent a massive shift in how we usually think about charm. Daniel realizes that attractiveness is actually about energy and presence.
Yes. Alex possesses this calming gravitational pull. By speaking calmly and actually listening, he creates a psychological safe space around him.
Here's where it gets really interesting, if I could use an analogy here.
Go for it.
The people Daniel was comparing himself to earlier, like the polished, loud, seemingly perfect coworkers, they are like stiff, scratchy designer suits.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You might admire a designer suit from across the room. It looks expensive, it commands attention, but it's fundamentally intimidating and uncomfortable to actually wear.
Yeah, you can't relax in it.
Exactly. Alex, on the other hand, is like a well-worn, incredibly comfortable sweater.
And building on that, the designer suit is entirely about the wearer trying to project their own status. It's basically a piece of armor designed to keep people at a respectful distance.
Hello.
The sweater, however, is entirely about how it makes the person interacting with it feel. It invites closeness. Alex's attractiveness has nothing to do with him projecting status or perfection.
It is entirely based on how his lack of armor makes other people feel.
Exactly.
Right. But, observing someone being a comfortable sweater from across the office is one thing. Figuring out how to knit that sweater for yourself is a completely different challenge.
It really is a leap.
Yeah, and Daniel reaches a breaking point where observation just isn't enough anymore. He finally approaches Alex and flat out asks for his secret.
And this is where we get the philosophical core of our entire deep dive. Daniel asks, how do you make people feel so comfortable? And Alex just smiles and says, I'm not trying to impress people. I'm just comfortable being myself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because just be yourself is like the ultimate bumper sticker cliche.
It really is the classic advice.
Right. It sounds great on a motivational poster, but you can't just tell an anxious person who is terrified of speaking a second language to stop worrying.
No, you can't.
If someone is paralyzed by the fear of judgment, they can't just flip a switch in their brain and decide to be perfectly comfortable.
That is a very fair point, and it's why we need to look at the actual mechanism of what Alex is doing rather than just the cliche.
Okay.
We have to look at how confidence is an allocation of cognitive resources. Think of your brain's attention like RAM on a computer.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so when Daniel is in a conversation, 90% of his cognitive RAM is focused inward. He's thinking, did I pronounce that right? Is my accent too thick? Are they staring at my posture? Do I sound stupid?
Which leaves him with maybe 10% of his brain power to actually listen to the person in front of him?
Exactly. And people subconsciously feel that lack of presence. They feel that you aren't really with them.
Wow, yeah.
What Alex is doing when he says, I'm not trying to impress people, is reallocating his RAM. Alex is taking 100% of his cognitive processing power and focusing it entirely outward onto the other person.
So by prioritizing listening carefully and being present, he literally doesn't have enough leftover RAM to panic about how he looks or sounds.
That's exactly it.
Ah, that is brilliant. It's
Yes.
a total redirection of energy. He isn't magically free of insecurities. He's just starving his insecurities of attention.
Right, he's depriving them of oxygen.
Yes. He's taking the spotlight off his own internal monologue and shining it brightly on whoever's speaking to him. And when you shine that spotlight on someone else, they feel deeply seen, which makes them feel incredibly warm towards you.
It is the ultimate paradigm shift. And Alex actually gives Daniel a 4-part framework to practice this reallocation of RAM.
What are the 4 parts?
He says, don't fear judgment, speak calmly, listen more, and be present. Confidence isn't about the absence of flaws. It is simply about your flaws no longer consuming all of your attention.
But Knowing the mechanics of cognitive RAM still doesn't make it an overnight fix. Daniel doesn't walk into work the next day suddenly operating at 100% outward focus.
No, the anxiety is too deeply ingrained for that.
Right. So Daniel realizes he needs to train his brain and his nervous system in a safe environment before he can deploy this at the office. We move from the philosophy of self-acceptance into the gritty, literal mechanics of how he builds it.
And this is where Daniel leverages his English language learning to fundamentally change his self-image. He starts incredibly small, in the privacy of his own home.
Okay.
He picks up a book called Short Stories in English for Beginners. It's a teach-yourself book. And he just starts reading the text out loud to an empty room.
Wait, why out loud, though? If he's just trying to learn vocabulary, he could just read silently, right?
He could, but because it isn't just about vocabulary, it's about nervous system desensitization.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. When you spend months or years shrinking yourself and staying quiet to avoid judgment, the literal sound of your own voice taking up space in a room feels alien and alarming.
Wow.
By reading out loud, Daniel is getting his brain and his body used to the physical vibration of his own presence. He is normalizing his own voice without the threat of a native speaker judging his pronunciation.
He's basically proving to his amygdala that speaking doesn't equal death. And then he escalates the practice. A day or so later, he moves to a second resource, a book called Learn English Through Stories. 16 stories to improve your English grammar and English vocabulary.
Yes.
But this time, he doesn't just read the words on the page. He forces himself to practice his own thoughts. After a story, he says out loud to the empty room, I think this story is interesting because, using simple, direct sentences.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we can look at this through the lens of neuroplasticity. Confidence is a practice skill. It is muscle memory.
Yeah.
Imagine Daniel's anxiety is like water flowing down the side of a mountain. For years, that water has carved a very deep, very fast riverbed. That deep riverbed is his default habit self-censorship, inward focus, shrinking.
So when he tries to speak up at work, the water naturally wants to violently rush down that deep anxiety trench because it's the path of least resistance.
Yes. And what Daniel is doing in his room with these grammar books is manually digging a brand new, incredibly shallow irrigation trench.
Oh, that makes sense.
It takes a massive amount of forced effort to divert the water out of the deep riverbed and into this new tiny trench of sharing an opinion. But every single time he says, I think this story is interesting because, he carves that new trench a little deeper. He is literally rewiring his brain's default pathways.
It makes so much sense when you view it as a mechanical process.
Yeah.
You would never expect water to suddenly flow uphill on its own.
No, of course not.
And you would never expect yourself to be perfectly fluent on day one of studying a new language. You wouldn't be furious at yourself for stumbling over basic grammar on the first try.
Right.
So why do we hold ourselves to the impossible standard of being flawlessly confident on our very first try in a high-stakes social setting?
We shouldn't, but society trains us to expect instant charisma. Daniel's third resource directly attacks that expectation.
What was the third resource?
He starts listening to an audio program called Effortless English, Learn to Speak English Like a Native. And the core philosophical message he internalizes from this isn't just about verb tenses.
What is it about?
It's an instruction to relax, speak naturally, and above all, completely abandon the need to be perfect.
So he is aggressively reprogramming his internal monologue. He's replacing the old tape that played "They sound so much smarter than me" with a new tape that says, confidence comes from practice, not from waiting.
Yes.
He stops waiting for confidence to magically arise so he can start participating in life. He realizes he has to participate awkwardly first in order to generate the confidence.
That is the crucial pivot in his journey. He accepts that the awkwardness is the toll he has to pay on the road to magnetism.
But, practicing alone in your bedroom is kind of the shallow end of the pool.
It is.
Eventually, if he wants to stop feeling invisible, Daniel has to test his newly dug neurological trenches in the real world. He has to take his practice back into the native-speaking office environment.
And when he does, he uses Alex's framework, but he keeps his expectations incredibly grounded. He starts small. He doesn't try to lead a massive boardroom presentation. He simply speaks a little more in casual passing. He actively chooses to smile. He forces himself to maintain eye contact rather than looking at the floor.
I really appreciate how honest the audio piece is about how this initial phase feels. It explicitly notes that it feels highly uncomfortable for Daniel at first.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Right. It isn't a cinematic montage where suddenly the lighting changes, a pop song plays, and everyone is carrying him on their shoulders.
No.
It feels clunky. His heart probably races. The water is still fighting to go back down that deep anxiety riverbed. But he forces it into the new trench anyway. He continues.
And because he doesn't quit during the awkward phase, the psychological feedback loop finally begins to activate.
Yes, sir.
Well, Daniel changed his internal energy through his private reading practice. That internal change shifted his external behavior. He smiled, held eye contact, and spoke up. That external behavior then fundamentally changed how others treated him. His coworkers began to respond differently. They smiled back. They instinctively included him in the spatial dynamics of a group.
And the culmination of all this work happens during a standard office conversation. Daniel takes a breath, focuses 100% of his cognitive RAM outward, and speaks clearly and calmly to share an idea.
And he isn't trying to sound like a genius.
No, he just states his thought. And people pause. They listen. They engage with his idea. For the very first time, Daniel feels completely, undeniably seen.
That moment is the ultimate proof of the lesson from our deep dive. When Daniel finally stopped judging himself, he stopped projecting a defensive energy.
Yeah.
When he felt comfortable with himself, flaws and all, others instinctively felt comfortable with him. True magnetism is deeply rooted in energy and presence, not in flawless execution.
So what does this all mean? When we look at that initial clunky discomfort Daniel felt when he first tried this at work, it is so crucial for you, the listener, to realize that discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is the literal sensation of growth. It is the feeling of your brain carving a new pathway, like breaking in a new pair of shoes. Daniel had to walk through the fire of his own awkwardness to get to the point where his new behavior felt like his own skin.
The discomfort is the price of admission to a larger life.
As we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill the ultimate takeaways for you to carry forward into your own life. We've learned that confidence isn't a genetic lottery ticket.
No, it's not.
It is a practice skill. You cannot wait around for it to suddenly wash over you before you start living. You have to start small. Read out loud to yourself if you need to get used to the sound of your own voice taking up space.
Yes, practice it.
Start allocating your cognitive RAM outward to the people around you. Speak a little more.
Yeah.
Smile. Be present. And most importantly, as Alex taught Daniel, stop trying to impress the room and just allow yourself to exist in it.
It's an incredibly powerful transformation. Daniel went from being a ghost, fading into the wallpaper out of fear, to someone who finally felt seen and included entirely by shifting his internal focus.
It's amazing.
But before we leave you today, I want to offer a final lingering thought that builds on Alex's philosophy of not trying to impress people.
Oh, I am all ears.
The journey we just analyzed focuses heavily on Daniel building his confidence so that his peers will finally include him, so that he can achieve that deeply human desire of being seen by the group.
Right.
But consider this for your own life moving forward. What if the ultimate highest level of self-acceptance isn't actually about successfully getting other people to see you?
What do you mean?
What if true mastery is reaching a state of such deep, profound internal comfort that you simply no longer care whether you are visible to the room or not?
Wow. You stop analyzing the wallpaper entirely because you're finally just enjoying the room. That is definitely something to think about.